With just 2 games left in the preseason, the Penguins will play one of those 2 tonight against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Hunter and I are going to get you set for that and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
Your Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's account a follow at LO_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making this part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Before we jump into it today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, Hunter, here we are. We have reached nearly the end of the line of the preseason and training camp. Next week, the Penguins will open the regular season against the New York Rangers. But before we get there, we've got 2 games to go against the Columbus Blue Jackets. One tonight at 7 o'clock and then another on Friday at 7 o'clock. And for quite a few players, this is it. This is where they have to make their mark. This is where they have to show they belong on an NHL roster. And we aren't really close to knowing who some of these players are yet, because likely tonight we are going to see what we have been seeing for a lot of this preseason. The home team, Columbus Blue Jackets, they're set to pretty much play what is going to be most of their NHL roster. And the Penguins will be countering with a lot of guys who are on the bubble and a lot of guys who will be in lesser roles once the regular season begins. Here are the lines, courtesy of just about everybody who was at morning skate today before the Penguins headed off to Columbus. First line, Rucker McGroarty with Kevin Hayes and Jesse Puljujärvi. Second line of Ville Koivunen, Tristan Brose, Valtteri Puustinen. Third line of Emil Bemstrom, Sam Poulin, and Corey Andovsky. Fourth line of Jonathan Gruden, Joona Koppanen, Boka Imama. And then on defense, you have Ryan Shea with Sebastian Aho. Second pairing of Owen Pickering and John Ludwig. And the third pair is Philip Kral and Nathan Clerman. And according to Mike Sullivan, in net tonight is Tristan Jarry, and he will play the full 60 minutes. So that is your Penguins lineup. Then you head over and look at who Columbus is dressing tonight. And it's a lot of NHL regulars, including, rather than giving you the whole lineup here, I'll just give you a few names. You've got Sean Corrali, Adam Fantilli, James Van Riemsdyk, Sean Moynihan, Boone Jenner, Jack Johnson, Zach Werenski, Ivan Provorov, David Jiricek, and I believe that Elvis Merzlikins will likely be in the net tonight. I have not seen any reporting on that yet, but either way, you look at these 2 rosters going into tonight's game, and like I said, it's the trend that we've been seeing for most of the preseason, not just with the Penguins, but around the league. The home team dresses a lot of their regulars. The visiting team plays their bubble guys and the guys they want to get a better look at. We'll talk a little bit more about the game itself, but first, Hunter, I want to get your thoughts on who you've got your eye on tonight, because I can think of a couple players, and I imagine we're probably of the same mindset going into this one.
Well, first off, just because I love joking around with you on this show, it's Sean Monahan, by the way, but you said something.
Did I say
else.
Moynihan?
Yeah, you did. Shame on
Moynihan.
you. Moynihan. I don't know who that is, but I know who Sean Monahan is.
Well,
so
I'll give the Columbus Blue Jackets an equal amount of crap here, because when I was looking at their website for their lineup for tonight, one of their defensemen who are playing tonight is Ian Provorov. Don't know if I've ever heard of that guy. So I had to go look at their roster, and I was like, oh, that is Ivan Provorov. They just made a typo.
Yeah. Ivan Provorov is playing with Zach Werenski. At least that's what the Blue Jackets' top defensive pairing during the morning skate was. But yeah, I love messing with Pat. He does it with me for names sometimes as well. But yes, it's very much Sean Monahan. And yeah, Columbus, they are playing all their guys tonight. Pat already went over the names: Boone Jenner, Monahan, Marchenko, Adam Fantilli, JVR. This is the varsity squad against the Penguins, kind of, how do I want to call it? C, D team, I guess. But in terms of players who I have my eye on, it's kind of been the same as it has been throughout the preseason here, especially now that Blake Lizotte is out with a concussion. Again, speedy recovery to him overall. But that does open the door for another player to potentially be on this opening night roster in 6 days. So before, maybe it was one of Cody Glass, Valtteri Pustin, or Jesse Puljujärvi that was going to make it. Maybe now it's 2. Heck, maybe now it's 3. But again, I have my eyes on Puljujärvi and Pustin. Pustin's going to be getting some playing time with Bros and Koivunen tonight. Maybe he'll get bumped up if he plays well the first couple of shifts. And then you get Puljujärvi on the top line with Kevin Hayes and McGroarty. I felt like when Cody Glass had his shot earlier this week against the Red Wings, and he's had a really good camp in preseason, I don't think he fully punched back in the way that Puljujärvi and Pustin did. Now I feel like in this game, Puljujärvi and Pustin potentially have a shot to fully overtake Glass as the 2 players that could be on this opening night roster and just be in the lineup overall next week for that first game against the Rangers. Maybe Glass is still an extra healthy scratch, something like that. But these 2 have a big opportunity in front of them, considering how well they've played throughout the preseason, especially Puljujärvi. He's been one of the best depth forwards for the Penguins in the preseason, and he'll have a great opportunity tonight playing on the top line against Columbus's varsity team. So I'm curious to see how that goes. Same thing also with Rutger McGroarty. He's now going up against Columbus's varsity team. How does he look next to Kevin Hayes? The Penguins have been experimenting with that combo a little bit throughout camp and preseason. It's something that we could potentially see during the season once McGroarty is fully ready. So I want to see more of that. Pickering, I'm excited to see him on the back end as well, of course. But it looks like to me, and I know Harrison Brunick is scheduled to take warm-up, but it doesn't look like he's playing in this game. That tells me that I think he's going to be in the final tune-up game, the varsity tune-up game for the Penguins on Friday when the Penguins play the Blue Jackets again in their final preseason game. And that could show that they, again, are very much thinking about a 9-game try. You look at the other defensemen in this lineup. Again, Ryan Shea, Sebastian Aho, John Ludwig. 3 depth defensemen for the Penguins. Harrison Brunick's not there. So I think that should tell everyone that they're very much giving this consideration.
Absolutely. And reporting from one of our good pals, Hannah Kirkle of DK Pittsburgh Sports, she has actually joined them recently, so congratulations to her. Those are in order. We definitely dropped the ball in letting people know that one of the best people on Penguins Twitter now is doing just some even better work. But she reported today that Mike Sullivan did say that Brunick is traveling with the team to Columbus and he will take warm up tonight, but will not play. To me, that tells me that they're getting this kid prepped for the grind of what is an NHL season, because a lot of the big names aren't taking the trip tonight. They're not heading to Columbus to take warm up, have press box popcorn, and have a little bit of fun on the road in Columbus. They're hanging back. They'll be ready for tomorrow for the preseason finale at PPG Paints Arena. So that, to me, is a little bit of a sign that they're kind of signaling to him, this is what life in the NHL is like. You don't sit at home when you're not playing. You don't wait for the next game. You come on the road, you take warm-ups, you get your treatment, you do your workouts, things like that, and then you watch the game and take in what you can take in while you're there. So that's an encouraging sign to me for Brunick that I'm with you. I think that they might be preparing this kid for a 9-game tryout. But along with that, back to the players who will be in the lineup tonight, a couple of my big players to keep an eye on are first, third-line center Sam Poulin. This is another chance for him to make an impression. While I think he is likely to find himself in the American Hockey League to start the season, because it has been a very vanilla preseason for him, has not really stood out. He could, at the very least, help his stock tonight with a good effort in being a player that they could look at to bring up when injuries inevitably arise. But this is a huge opportunity for him to make that mark. And then you kind of hinted at it. I'm very interested in the second pairing on defense tonight of Owen Pickering and John Ludwig. We have consistently said we need to see more from John Ludwig. We love the fact that He's a physical presence, but we need to see more from him. He can't just be a bruiser. He's got to show he can play at the pace of the NHL game. He has to be able to move the puck well and bring more than just being a guy who can throw big hits in big moments, because we know in the modern day NHL that does have plenty of value. Listeners know I have been saying this team needs bastards, and he fits into that category, but it can't be all that you bring. You have to have a more diversified skill set, and we need to see that from Ludwig tonight. And then his partner, Owen Pickering, probably going to be the victim of a numbers game at the end of the day with everybody else that's on the roster for defense. He's just likely to miss the boat simply because there's so many other players both ahead of him for being established, and just he's got some more seasoning needed. He has to go to the AHL, play a little bit better, and then who knows, in a year or two, he could become a mainstay on the roster. But very similar to Sam Poulin, while he hasn't had a vanilla camp, if he can have a solid performance against Columbus's varsity team, that puts him up there on the list of guys who can get called up when, again, injuries inevitably arise. And lastly, I want to see another solid performance from Tristan Jarry, because his preseason's been fine. You think about the last game. Yeah, he took the loss, but he didn't get a lot of work. The Penguins were extremely dominant in that game. Just the pucks didn't go in because, again, they got goalied. But overall, Tristan Jarry's had a solid performance. And now, with the injury to Alex Nedeljkovic, he is going to be called on probably more early in this season. So we want to see him really take charge and look good to start this preseason to end this preseason, going into the regular season.
Yeah, it's as I said on Wednesday, they're going to need him at the top of his game to start the season because Nedeljkovic is week to week with this injury. You obviously are going to have Blomqvist available to you as well. And if I had to guess, I think Blomqvist is going to get the full game on Friday, just I think as a test to see what he can do in front of the varsity squad. And I think that's a great idea, by the way, for Mike Sullivan, the coaching staff, get to see what he looks like in front of the A team, as opposed to, Pat, a little over a week ago where he just got shelled going up against the Sabres A team, and the Penguins were kind of icing their C or D team at that point since the preseason was just beginning. So I actually like that move quite a bit. But yeah, I want to see him have another good performance tonight. Again, I'm not really going to crush him too much for that late goal against the Red Wings. The Penguins played really well in that game, but I still feel like he's been fine. But I do want to see how he does tonight overall against Columbus's A team. I think he'll be fine, but, again, not really that big of a deal. In Pickering's case, I agree. This is kind of a numbers game with him. He's just turning pro, so he's going to get some seasoning in the AHL. He'll be getting top 4 minutes, if not potentially top pairing minutes down there in Wilkes-Barre. So I think that's going to be great for his development. And again, as we've been saying, there's a chance that he comes up during the season if some injuries arise on the blue line. Also, when it comes to Sam Poulin, I obviously know they have to put him on waivers. I don't think they're going to lose him to waivers, though. I know some players get picked off waivers from other teams. I really don't see another team taking him off waivers. I just think he kind of is what he is at this point. Obviously, I want him to play well tonight just because his camp has just been kind of pedestrian overall. But I do think if he gets put on waivers before going down to the AHL, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, just because I don't think they're going to lose him to waivers. I think there's actually a better chance that they would lose Pusnin to waivers than they would Poulin, at least in my opinion. But yeah, those are most of my main thoughts on the preseason game tonight as well. We're kind of still eyeing the same few players that we've been eyeing throughout the preseason, and we want to see them build on their performances, if not, go to heights they haven't been at yet.
Absolutely. And we'll get a little bit more into that in the second segment with some comments from Mike Sullivan about a few of those players, as well as some other news and notes from today's morning skate and practices. But we will do that when we return right after this. But first, we're going to tell you about our sponsor, and that is FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And we all know there is a big game coming up with an up-and-coming offense in the Pittsburgh Steelers and a pretty good offense in the Dallas Cowboys. And if you're getting a hunch while watching Sunday Night Football, FanDuel is your spot to make those bets, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're back here on the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And before we get into some of the injury updates, I kind of want to keep this discussion going on that battle that we've had our eye on for the last week or so with those handful of forwards. And Mike Sullivan today with some very, very high praise of Jesse Puljujärvi. He was asked about his performance in camp, how he looks after a healthy offseason where he had an entire summer to train rather than get himself rehabilitated from that hip surgery he had last year. And this is what Mike Sullivan had to say. I think Jesse's been one of the best surprises of training camp. He comes back for camp in great shape, and he's had a really strong camp. I think he's made a significant impression on our group, and he's deserving of the opportunities that he has been given throughout the course of training camp. I think he's a guy that could potentially add a dimension to our team. I agree with a lot of that because we kind of got lost in the weeds as we were waiting to see if this team would push towards a playoff spot. Every game had so much meaning, and every single play, every single game, every single moment was put under a microscope because we were watching them battle for a playoff spot. So everything counted. It wasn't just, you couldn't step back and take a 1,000-foot view. You had to look at everything in the context with which it was happening in the moment. And we said this at the end of the year, that the way he played, his forechecking ability, his willingness to shoot the puck, and just the speed he played the game at was going to really be valuable for this team in the middle six or the bottom six. And this training camp and preseason, he has continued that type of game. And I still believe going into tonight, going into the end of camp, he really probably is in the pole position to take that spot. Now you add in Mike Sullivan's comments, and I think Jesse Puljujärvi's made this team.
Yeah, if he's able to finish this off, I think tonight, I think he will definitely make this team for next week when the season starts against the Rangers. I've really liked his ability to forecheck, especially down low throughout the preseason. He's been able to really just take the puck away from defenders at will, to be honest, and then really start the cycle game for the Penguins. He's been able to set up chances from all over the ice. He's been good in front of the net front. His overall game right now is performing well. And this is also what happens when you get a full offseason to train. He's not coming off that double hip surgery this offseason. That was last year. You get that full offseason to train, you can start to get more of your game back. And I feel like that's exactly what has happened here with Puljujärvi. You're seeing more of a complete player compared to last year, and you're seeing someone who, again, is way more healthy, obviously, and he's using that to his advantage. And again, I think if he's able to really show out on that line with McGroarty and Kevin Hayes, I do think he will be in this lineup next week when this team opens up against the Rangers. We'll have to see on Puustinen, but yeah, I've been really happy with Puljujärvi throughout camp in the preseason. It's been nice to see him playing even better than he did last year during the regular season with the Penguins. We kind of saw it in spurts, especially in that game I felt like against Colorado late in the season. I know the Penguins lost that game, It was right before the Penguins started making their big push, but that was, I felt like, one of his best games of the season with the way he was forechecking, the way that he was going to the net. He was just a menace on the puck all night long, and you're seeing that carried over to the preseason here. And again, I hope it continues tonight.
The other thing with Puljujärvi, I think you have to take into account a little bit is the comfortability factor now with having a contract, knowing which team he's playing for, and having experience with them again. Because you go back and look at last year. He gets the double hip surgery. He comes to the Penguins on a PTO after recovery. He has to wait a few weeks before he gets offered a deal. And then he's in and out of the lineup. And you couple all that together, and it's really difficult to find a stride. It's really difficult to find a place where you belong, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to survive. You're trying to prove that you belong on the team while still figuring out what the team's all about, where you fit, if you're up to the level you need to be at after a really, really major surgery. And Now you look at it where he is coming into this camp and into this season. He's got about a half of a season worth of experience of being in the Penguins organization. He's probably developed relationships with multiple players as well as the coaching staff, and he just knows where he's going to be, and he can focus on getting himself into that type of shape and then focus on what do I have to do to make this team and what role do I have to play. And that's a lot more clear now. And you can see that coming through in his performances this year, which is just such an asset to him. And again, I don't think we need to hold against him where he was drafted. We know what those early 2010s Oilers teams were like, just an absolute disaster top to bottom. He's a definite NHL player, and he's likely never going to live up to the hype of where he was drafted, but he absolutely could bring a valuable asset to this Penguins franchise.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could definitely, again, see him scoring double-digit goals this season if he plays the full season, 10 to 12, 15 goals, somewhere in that area. If he's able to provide that type of value to the Penguins while also being, again, good on the forecheck, a good playmaker, that is an upgrade for the bottom six this year compared to last year with how many players just rotated in and out of the lineup on the third and fourth lines throughout the season. Changing gears a little bit though, Pat, we did get a big debut at practice today as Erik Karlsson finally practiced for the Penguins today, although I will say non-contact capacity, but this is where you got to start. I mean, he's missed all of camp. He's missed all the preseason. He's been skating for the most part this week. You got to get him into practice and just ease him into it. I'm sure he's going to take part contact next and then full contact probably this weekend and the next week before the regular season starts. But this is massive news that he is now back at practice. He was doing some drills today with the team. He was also on the top power play unit with the big three, along with Rickard Rakell. It's still 6 days away, but as it stands right now, it's looking more and more likely that he will be ready for next week unless he doesn't take contact.
It's a very positive step in that, like you said it there right at the end. The biggest thing I will have my eye on is when does he take contact? Because regardless of, we still don't know what the injury is. They haven't specified whatever is ailing him as the NHL is wont to do, but you still have to show that you can take contact. You have to show that once you get into those simulated game situations that you're not going to re-aggravate whatever the injury is. But both him going through drills as well as getting power play practice time is a very, very positive step. One negative to keep an eye on, it might be something, it might be nothing, was Brian Rust was not on the ice today, 2 days in a row. It was a maintenance day for him yesterday. He missed again today. Now,
usually means you're battling something a little bit. It doesn't sound like it's that serious, but that usually means you have a little something going on.
And again, on a day like today where they're playing mostly their bubble guys and guys who are going to play lesser roles come regular season, you figure he doesn't need to skate today. You don't need to have him in the workflow as he recovers or deals with whatever little thing he's dealing with. And if we see him skate tomorrow, as we expect, they'll likely play a lot of the regulars in the finale, and he's not there, then we can start hovering our hand over the panic button a little bit. But for now, just something to keep an eye on. So those are our updates from training camp today as we get set for the first of a back-to-back against the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's tonight at 7 o'clock at Nationwide Arena in Columbus, Ohio. When we come back, we are going to talk about one of the players that Hunter and I have been pretty excited about this offseason, and that is Sergei Murashov. He is off to a solid start with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. We will talk about that when we return right after this. All right, welcome back to the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp, joined as always by the illustrious Hunter Hodes. And big couple of games for the surprise of the offseason. I would say maybe the second biggest surprise behind the Penguins getting Rucker McGroarty. That was goaltender Sergei Murashov, who came over from Russia this summer. Very promising young goalie prospect. He was sent down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, and he is off to a very solid start. The Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins are now 2-0 in 2 straight preseason games. On Tuesday, they beat the Lehigh Valley Phantoms 6-1, and Murashov did play the entire game. Did not have a lot of work, though. He faced all of 13 shots, made 12 saves. And then today, this morning, in a fun little, this is minor league hockey, not NHL hockey, the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins played the Hershey Bears in a game that was late morning, early afternoon. That game went to a shootout with Wilkes-Barre winning 4-3. Sergei Murashov with a little bit more work in that game, 20 shots against, 17 saves. But the big thing was in the shootout, did not give up a goal, stopped all of Hershey's shooters, and Wilkes-Barre gets a 4-3 victory over the Hershey Bears. And this is a very encouraging start because we expected to see him get some reps before he got sent down. That never happened. But then he goes down to Wilkes-Barre, plays 2 games, and looks pretty darn good while he's doing it.
Yeah, he's very much doing a good job adjusting to North American hockey. Those saves that he made in the shootout were pretty nice as well. And he was doing that sort of thing during the rookie camp earlier this year during the summer. He was just tremendous overall. And you saw all the praises from the other Penguin prospects that had never gone against him before. They were all just speaking in the media being like, holy crap, yeah, this guy is insanely talented. And you're seeing that at least to start the season here in Wilkes-Barre. And I will say for Murashov, he'll have a shot at maybe starting the season in Wilkes-Barre just because of the injury to Alex Nedeljkovic. I felt like if Nedeljkovic was fully healthy, obviously you would see Blomqvist in Wilkes-Barre probably, if I had to guess, with Philip Larson, and then you'd see Murashov with Wheeling. But right now with Ned being hurt, I do think you could see Murashov being a backup or maybe a spot starter in Wilkes-Barre to start the season until Ned gets healthy, and then maybe you reassign him to Wheeling. I think overall for the full 24-25 season, he's going to play most of his games in Wheeling just because of the logjam, and you got to get him that experience of North American hockey. But I will say there's at least a chance that he starts the season in Wilkes-Barre because of the injury.
Yeah, this is a massive opportunity for Sergei Murashov with the Alex Nedeljkovic injury, because as we know, Joel Blomqvist is going to be likely, I would say it's pretty much certain at this point, the backup in Pittsburgh while Nedeljkovic recovers. So that is pretty much going to put Murashov in a position to get American Hockey League experience, North American experience. And if he's able to stay down there and show out and play really well, kind of been the theme of the episode here, where he is going to have an opportunity to raise his stock within the organization. And they're already pretty high on him because the way they talked about him during development camp, the way they talked about him during rookie camp, they're extremely excited. And this goalie in Sergei Murashov has a ton of upside, because if you missed it during the summer when we spoke about Murashov, you look at his numbers, and while it wasn't quite the KHL, it was basically the KHL's version of the American League. He was very good over there. And for only being 20, that's very promising, because we know both in Russia and in North America, it takes a little bit longer for goaltenders to develop. Unlike skaters, when they're in their early 20s, late teens, 20, 21, 22, you can see the raw talent, but it doesn't often translate to consistent performances until they start to be 22, 23, 24. With Murashov, you're seeing a lot of solid performances. And if he can do that in the American League, it really is going to bring some tough decisions for management of what to do with all the goalies they have in the system.
Right. And I feel like no matter what, he's going to have an opportunity to really, again, just show the entire Penguins organization what he can do, no matter if it's Wheeling or Wilkes-Barre. So say, for example, he spends a good chunk of the season in Wheeling, puts up some really good numbers. Okay, you can definitely move him up to Wilkes-Barre next year, and then maybe have him be the spot starter, if not the number 1 overall. Now, say he plays pretty well Wilkes-Barre to start the season, if that's where they want to start him just because of the injury to Ned, plays really well there, then okay, that's a really good problem to have, because you'll have Blomqvist coming back at some point, and you just have 2 really good options there overall. So in my opinion, I see this as a win-win no matter where Murashov plays this season, whether it's Wheeling or it's Wilkes-Barre, excuse me.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on him as well as a few other players who have already been sent down. And obviously, we're going to keep an eye on tonight's game as well as Friday's game. But that's going to do it for the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We will be back with a brand new episode for you tomorrow, recapping tonight's game and getting you set for whatever else may happen now that we are right here at the close of training camp. And before you know it, real hockey is going to be played. But for Hunter Hodes, I am Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Friday.